I never thought I'd be the guy posting one of these long, messy life stories on Reddit, but here I am. Fair warning. This is going to be a multi-part saga because there's just too much to pack into one post. Names changed for obvious reasons, though anyone in Texas probably remembers this shitshow from the news. My ex-wife Melanie and I met at UT Austin. She was the ambitious type, always talking about escaping our small-town roots and making it big somewhere else. I was content with simpler things. After graduation, we both ended up back in Pinewood, population 8,742, a dusty little dot on the map about 2 hours east of Dallas. Not exactly what she had planned, but the teaching position at the high school was good money, and I had taken over my dad's construction business. For the first few years, things were fine. We bought a modest house, joined the local church, more for networking than worship, and settled into small-town married life. Melanie threw herself into community activities, PTA, town council meetings, charity events, positioning herself as Pinewood's unofficial social director. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. The constant complaints about being trapped, the passive-aggressive comments about my lack of ambition, the way she scrolled through Instagram looking at exotic vacation spots with this defeated look on her face. David, she say, don't you ever want more than this? To be something more than just another Pinewood lifer? The truth was, I liked our life. I had good friends, work I was proud of, and roots. But to Melanie, roots were just another word for chains. Then came Memorial Day weekend 2023. Melanie had a teachers' conference in Houston. At least that's what she told me. 3 days away. No big deal. I kissed her goodbye on Friday morning, watched her drive away in her white Nissan, and went to work. The call came on Saturday night. Her mother, frantic, asking if I'd heard from Melanie. The conference hotel had no record of her checking in. Her phone was going straight to voicemail. By Sunday morning, I was sitting in our living room surrounded by police officers, trying to explain that no, we hadn't been fighting. No, she didn't have any enemies. Yes, I tried calling all her friends. By Monday, the local news picked it up. Local teacher missing. Then the Dallas stations. Then, because America loves a missing white woman story, the national networks. I watched in disbelief as our wedding photo flashed across CNN. Her car had been found abandoned at a rest stop near the Oklahoma border. Driver's door open, her purse still inside. A trucker reported seeing a dark SUV speeding away from the area. The FBI showed up at my door Tuesday morning. 2 agents in dark suits with grim expressions. They sat at our kitchen table, the one Melanie had insisted on refinishing herself last summer, and asked me the same questions the local police had, but with a different undertone. Where exactly was I all weekend? Did I know about my wife's life insurance policy? Was I aware she recently increased the coverage? I wasn't just a worried husband anymore. I was a suspect. For 3 days, they tore our life apart. Interviewed neighbors, colleagues, family. Examined our finances, our text messages, our browser histories. 3 days of me barely sleeping, jumping every time the phone rang, watching news anchors speculate about Melanie's fate while showing B-roll of our house. Then came Thursday. I was at the police station for yet another interview when the call came in. Melanie had been found, alive, in a luxury hotel in Austin, with her college friend, James. The lead detective stared at me, waiting for my reaction. Did I know? Was I in on it? The truth hit me like one of my construction beams. My wife had faked her own disappearance for a weekend fling. But that was just the beginning of the nightmare, because Melanie's story was about to take a turn that would destroy both our lives in ways I couldn't imagine. First, thanks for all the comments on my last post. Some of you guessed parts of what was coming. But trust me, reality was stranger than anything you could imagine. When I left off, I was sitting in that sterile police interrogation room, processing the news that my wife hadn't been kidnapped. She was found in an Austin hotel with her friend, James. The detective watched me carefully as this information sank in, probably expecting either guilty knowledge or shocked betrayal. I gave him the latter. My hands started shaking so badly I couldn't hold the styrofoam coffee cup they'd given me. Who the hell is James? I remember asking. The detective, Ramirez was his name, slid a photo across the table. A tall guy with carefully tousled hair and the kind of confident smile that probably cost his parents a fortune in orthodontist bills. I'd never seen him before in my life. James Whitman, Ramirez said. College acquaintance of your wife's. Works in marketing in Dallas now. I must have looked genuinely blindsided because Ramirez's demeanor softened slightly. He explained that housekeeping at the Four Seasons Austin had recognized Melanie from the news and alerted hotel security, who contacted the FBI. When agents burst into room 642, they found Melanie and James enjoying room service breakfast, very much not kidnapped. What was her explanation? I asked. That's where things get complicated, Ramirez said. Your wife is claiming she was having a mental health crisis. Says she felt trapped in her life and needed to escape. Left her car and belongings at the rest stop to make it look like something happened to her so she wouldn't have to face consequences. I almost laughed. Melanie, who mocked people in town who went to therapy, suddenly claiming mental health issues. Convenient. And James? Says he ran into her at a gas station off I-20. She was crying, seemed upset. Claims he didn't know about the kidnapping story until the FBI showed up. Even Ramirez looked skeptical repeating this. The timeline didn't add up. The media coverage had been extensive. There was no way they hadn't seen it. I was released that afternoon. The FBI agents informed me they were still investigating because filing a false report and instigating a federal investigation were serious offenses. They advised me not to speak with Melanie until they completed their interviews. I went home to find news vans parked on our street. Neighbors peeked through curtains. My phone had 47 missed calls. I turned it off, closed all the blinds, and drank half a bottle of bourbon. The next day, the story broke nationally. Teacher fakes kidnapping for romantic getaway, screamed the headlines. Our wedding photo was everywhere, alongside pictures of James pulled from his LinkedIn. The internet started digging. Someone found Melanie's old college Facebook albums, with photos of her and James at parties looking very cozy. Melanie wasn't brought home until Saturday, almost a full week after she disappeared. I was sitting on our porch when the black SUV pulled up. She stepped out looking nothing like the frantic, traumatized woman I expected. Her clothes were neat, hair freshly styled. She walked up our path with her chin high, like she was entering a gala rather than returning to the mess she created. David, she said coolly, as if greeting an acquaintance at the grocery store. I just looked at her, this stranger wearing my wife's face. I suppose you want an explanation, she said. I think they figured it out, I replied. You were bored and unhappy, so you decided to blow up our lives. Her face hardened. That's so typical of you, David. Simplifying everything, never seeing the nuance. And then, standing right there on our porch with the neighbors no doubt watching through binoculars, Melanie told me what she really thought of our marriage. 8 years, she hissed. 8 years of my life wasted in this pathetic town with a man who has no ambition beyond pouring concrete and watching football with his high school buddies. The venom in her voice stunned me. Had she always felt this way? Had I been completely blind? You know what the worst part is? She continued. I actually convinced myself I was happy here. That I could make a difference teaching those kids, hosting those stupid book clubs, planning town events that nobody appreciates. I found my voice. So instead of talking to me, instead of getting a divorce like a normal person, you decided to fake your own kidnapping? She waved her hand dismissively. I didn't plan it that way. I just wanted a weekend away to think, to breathe. Running into James was serendipity. The level of self-delusion was stunning. Serendipity that cost taxpayers about $1 million in search resources and made us both into national laughingstocks? Melanie's eyes flashed. This is exactly what I am talking about. Always so concerned with what other people think, with being the good guy. Well, maybe I am tired of being the good wife in this boring, suffocating life. And that's when she dropped the bomb that would change everything. Besides, she said with a cruel smile, I am not coming back anyway. I am filing for divorce. James has connections in Dallas. I am going to start over. I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt something like relief washing over me. But I had no idea how nasty things were about to get. After Melanie's bombshell announcement that she was filing for divorce and moving to Dallas with James, I expected her to pack her bags and leave. Instead, she marched into our house, went straight to the bedroom, and locked the door. When I tried to follow her in, she yelled that she was gathering evidence, and that if I interfered, she'd call the police and tell them I was threatening her. This was my first taste of the new Melanie, calculating, vindictive, and willing to weaponize anything, including false accusations. I slept on the couch that night, listening to her rummaging through closets and drawers. In the morning, she emerged with 2 suitcases and several boxes, which James loaded into his BMW while avoiding eye contact with me. The neighbors didn't even pretend not to watch. I'll have my lawyer contact you, she said as she walked out, as if this were a business transaction rather than the end of our 8-year marriage. 2 days later, I was served with divorce papers. The grounds? Emotional abandonment and controlling behavior creating an unsafe domestic environment. I nearly choked reading it. Melanie was claiming that I was the reason she ran away, that my suffocating control over her life had driven her to a desperate escape. She was painting herself as a victim fleeing an abusive relationship rather than a cheater who faked her own kidnapping. Meanwhile, the FBI investigation was progressing. They interviewed me again, this time focusing on our marriage. Had I been controlling? Did I monitor her movements? Restrict her access to money? The questions made me sick. Melanie was flipping the script entirely, and the authorities were at least considering her narrative. The media, however, wasn't buying it. A Dallas Morning News reporter found Melanie's blog from 2 years prior where she detailed our perfect small-town life and supportive husband who encourages my dreams. Old colleagues came forward describing her as ambitious and sometimes ruthless in community politics. Her story was unraveling. 6 days after she left, the hammer fell. The FBI charged her with making false statements to federal officers and misuse of emergency services. They found text messages between her and James dating back months, planning their weekend together. There was premeditation. The mental health crisis excuse collapsed entirely. Melanie's response? To double down. She gave an exclusive interview to a women's magazine portraying herself as a desperate woman trapped in a stifling marriage who made one terrible mistake in how she chose to escape. She claimed I had isolated her from friends, subtly undermined her career ambitions, and made her feel worthless, classic abuser tactics that I had never engaged in. The interview included carefully selected photos of our house that made it look sparse and prison-like rather than the warm home we built together. She described Pinewood as a patriarchal cage, where women were expected to sacrifice their identities for their husbands' comfort. Reading that interview was surreal. It described a marriage and a man I didn't recognize. The worst part? Some people believed her. My inbox filled with hateful messages from strangers calling me an abuser. Men's rights activists tried to recruit me to their cause. Everyone had an opinion about a marriage they knew nothing about. Then came the financial hit. Our joint accounts were frozen pending the divorce proceedings. Melanie's legal troubles meant she was suspended from teaching without pay, but her parents, who always thought she married beneath her, bankrolled an aggressive divorce attorney. I had to take out a loan just to secure my own representation. The lawyer I hired, Patricia, was a no-nonsense divorce veteran who seen it all. After reviewing our case, She looked at me with grim determination. They going after everything, she said. The house, your business, even claiming part of your inheritance from your father. And they pushing for you to pay her legal fees, including her criminal defense. I stared at her, dumbfounded. Can she do that? Patricia sighed. She can try. And given how high profile this case is, we need to prepare for a judge who might be sympathetic to her twisted narrative. But Patricia had an ace up her sleeve. While the FBI had been investigating me as a potential suspect in Melanie's disappearance, they gathered evidence that would now prove crucial to my defense, including interviews with neighbors and friends who contradicted Melanie's claims about our marriage. The real break came when James's wife entered the picture. Yes, James was married too. Her name was Rebecca, and she had a story of her own to tell. So, James was married. His wife Rebecca reached out to my lawyer after seeing the media coverage. At first, I was skeptical. Was this just another angle to this circus? But Patricia arranged a meeting at her office, and I'll never forget my first impression of Rebecca. Poised, professional, and absolutely furious. Rebecca was a pediatric surgeon in Dallas. She and James had been married for 3 years, and as she explained with clinical precision, she had documented evidence of his history of infidelity. I've been building a case for my own divorce, she explained, sliding a folder across the table. When I saw your wife's interview painting herself as the victim, I knew I had to come forward. The folder contained screenshots of text messages between James and Melanie going back nearly a year. Not just planning their weekend getaway, but explicit messages about their long-term future together. Melanie had been calculating her exit from our marriage for months. Most damning were the messages about the kidnapping plan. It wasn't a spontaneous mental health crisis. It was a calculated scheme. Melanie had researched which rest stop had non-functioning security cameras. She deliberately left evidence suggesting an abduction. And she mocked the predictable media response to a missing white woman in texts to James. Poor David will be beside himself, she written. But he'll get over it. He always does. He's nothing if not predictable. Reading her casual cruelty about a man she shared 8 years with was like being stabbed. Who was this person? Had I ever really known her? Rebecca's evidence changed everything. Patricia immediately filed it with the court and forwarded copies to the FBI. The prosecutor handling Melanie's criminal case contacted me for a meeting the next day. We upgrading the charges, she informed me. This moves from reckless behavior to deliberate fraud. The evidence shows premeditation and awareness of the consequences. While this was vindicating legally, it made the public scrutiny even more intense. News vans returned to Pinewood. Reporters ambushed me at work. I started sleeping at my buddy Mike's hunting cabin just to escape. The story took an even more bizarre turn when Melanie's mother held a press conference defending her daughter. Standing outside her country club with perfectly coiffed hair, she claimed Melanie had been driven to desperate measures by the stifling atmosphere of small-town life and an unsupportive husband. She announced they had hired a high-powered criminal defense attorney from Houston who specialized in cases involving misunderstood women. This new attorney, Clayton Barnes, was a media darling who immediately launched a PR offensive. He arranged for Melanie to undergo a psychological evaluation, which conveniently diagnosed her with situational depression and anxiety related to domestic circumstances. Barnes started floating the idea that Melanie had been in a dissociative state when planning her disappearance. Meanwhile, James threw Melanie under the bus entirely. Facing his own divorce and potential criminal charges as an accomplice, he cut a deal with prosecutors. His new story? He had been manipulated by an unstable woman, and had no idea about the kidnapping hoax until it was too late. According to this revised narrative, he was just an old friend trying to comfort a woman in crisis who got in way over his head. Melanie was furious. The text messages Rebecca had provided showed James was an enthusiastic participant in the scheme, but he deleted his copies and claimed Melanie had fabricated the entire text history. It was his word against hers, and since she already admitted to one elaborate deception, his story gained traction. The divorce proceedings turned nuclear. Melanie's legal team filed for emergency spousal support, claiming she couldn't work due to trauma and public humiliation. They demanded $5,000 monthly plus continued health insurance coverage. They also filed motions for me to cover her mounting legal bills since her financial distress was a direct result of the marriage breakdown. Patricia was worth every penny I was borrowing to pay her. She systematically dismantled these claims in court, presenting evidence of Melanie's pre-divorce financial planning, including a secret bank account she'd been funneling money into for months. The judge denied the emergency support request and ordered a full financial disclosure from both parties. But Melanie had one more card to play, a nuclear option that would change the stakes completely. She was pregnant, and claiming it was mine. This is the final chapter of my story. Writing these posts has been both therapeutic and draining, but I think it's important to share how everything concluded. Thank you to everyone who followed along and offered support. When Melanie dropped the pregnancy bombshell in court, it felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Her attorney dramatically presented medical records confirming she was 10 weeks pregnant. 10 weeks put conception squarely during our marriage, but also potentially during her kidnapping weekend with James. My client is experiencing a high-risk pregnancy due to extreme stress, Clayton Barnes announced to the judge. She requires stability and support during this difficult time. The implication was clear. I should drop my opposition to her financial demands for the sake of my unborn child. It was emotional blackmail, pure and simple. Patricia immediately motioned for a paternity test, which the judge granted despite Barnes' protests about adding undue stress to an expectant mother. The test could be performed safely after 12 weeks, and the divorce proceedings were paused until then. Those 2 weeks of waiting were the longest of my life. I barely slept, imagining a future tethered forever to Melanie through a child. Would she use the baby as a weapon? Would I spend the next 18 years in custody battles? Or worse, would I fall for her manipulation again for the sake of keeping a family together? The day the results came in, Patricia called me into her office rather than delivering the news by phone. That's when I knew. The test shows you are not the biological father, she said gently. The relief was so overwhelming I actually broke down crying right there in her leather visitor's chair. James was the father, which complicated his innocent bystander narrative considerably. When the news hit the courtroom, Melanie's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. She screamed that the test was rigged, that I had corrupted the lab, that this was part of my campaign to destroy her. The judge had to threaten her with contempt before she regained control. That meltdown changed everything. Public opinion, which had been somewhat divided with some people still believing aspects of Melanie's victim narrative, shifted decisively. Local news coverage stopped portraying the case as a he said, she said, and began reporting more critically on her deceptions. With the pregnancy leverage eliminated, the divorce proceeded rapidly. The judge was clearly disgusted with Melanie's attempts to manipulate the court and awarded me the house and my business intact. She received her personal property and her retirement account. Less than she'd have gotten in an amicable split, but far more than she deserved. On the criminal front, Melanie eventually accepted a plea deal. 2 years probation, community service, and restitution to the agencies involved in the search. Her teaching license was suspended for 5 years. James received similar terms, plus his own messy divorce from Rebecca, who took him for everything he was worth. The media circus eventually moved on to fresher scandals. The news vans disappeared from Pinewood, and my neighbors stopped treating me like a curiosity. Life began to feel almost normal again. Melanie moved to Houston, not Dallas, since her relationship with James imploded shortly after the paternity test. Last I heard through mutual acquaintances, She's working in real estate and telling a completely revisionist history of our marriage and the kidnapping incident to anyone who listen. She and James share custody of their daughter, born 7 months after our divorce was finalized. As for me, Pinewood doesn't feel like home anymore. Too many whispers, too many sidelong glances at the grocery store. I sold the house 6 months ago and moved to Colorado, where my cousin helped me start a branch of my construction business in a growing area outside Denver. I am dating again, cautiously. Her name is Allison. She's a geological engineer, and she did her own Google search on me before our third date. We had a long, honest conversation about everything that happened, and she didn't run for the hills. Sometimes I still wake up wondering how I missed the signs with Melanie. There were red flags I chose to ignore. Her constant dissatisfaction, her casual cruelty toward others she deemed less than, the way she rewrote history to make herself the hero of every story. But obsessing over the past won't change it. I am focused on building something new. The one unexpected positive from this whole ordeal? I've developed a much stronger sense of who I am and what I deserve. Melanie always made me feel like I wasn't enough, not ambitious enough, not sophisticated enough, not worthy of her. Now I understand that was a reflection of her character, not mine. I still believe in marriage and partnership, but now I know it should feel like mutual respect and support, not like constantly trying to prove your worth to someone who's already decided you don't measure up. If there's a lesson in all this, maybe it's that sometimes the most destructive lies aren't the ones others tell us, but the ones we tell ourselves when we ignore what's right in front of us. I spent years convincing myself that Melanie's restlessness and dissatisfaction were normal, that her dream of a different life didn't mean she wanted a different husband. I was wrong, but I am not wrong anymore. The end.